You won't believe the mess that started with something as innocent as a Saturday barbecue. If you've ever lived under a homeowners association, you probably already know the type, the self-appointed neighborhood sheriff who thinks they can run everyone's life. Well, this story is about how one of those people, a woman I'll call Karen, tried to humiliate me in front of my family and neighbors. She called the cops on my backyard, BBQ, thinking she could get me fined, shamed, and controlled. But what she didn't expect was that her own skeletons were about to come tumbling out of the closet, and by the time it was over, she wasn't just embarrassed, she was kicked off the HOA board entirely. Let me take you back to how it all began. I'm Tom, a 52-year-old veteran living in a quiet suburb in Texas. After serving my country and retiring from the Army, all I wanted was some peace and a good life for my family. My wife, Laura, is a nurse, and together we've raised two amazing kids, both in college now. We worked hard to afford our modest home, and the thing that drew me to this neighborhood was the promise of community, a place where neighbors looked out for each other. That's what I thought I was getting. But anyone who has ever lived in an HOA knows that sometimes you don't buy into a community. You buy into a fiefdom run by people with too much time and too little humility. At first, life was good. My neighbors were friendly, and we'd wave when we saw each other mowing the lawn or walking the dog. A few houses down, though, lived Karen. Even before I knew her name, I knew her type. You could hear her voice carrying down the street, always criticizing, always demanding, always finding fault. She wasn't just on the HOA board. She was the HOA board. Or at least, she acted like it. My first real encounter with Karen was over something ridiculous, my trash can placement. According to the HOA rules, you're supposed to keep your trash cans out of sight except on collection day. Fair enough. But one week, my son had left ours by the garage overnight, and before I even realized, there was a bright orange violation notice slapped to my front door. The note wasn't just a fine, it was dripping with condescension. Failure to comply with community standards reflects poorly on the neighborhood, it read, and at the bottom signed in bold Sharpie, HOA Compliance Chair Karen. I remember muttering to myself, so this is how it's going to be. The very next day, I caught Karen standing in front of my driveway, arms crossed, snapping pictures of my lawn. I walked out and asked, "Can I help you?" She gave me this tight little smile and said, "Just making sure everything's in compliance, don't take it personally, rules are rules." Something about the way she said it made my blood boil. It wasn't about rules, it was about control. Fast forward a few months. It was Memorial Day weekend and I decided to host a barbecue for my family and a couple of close neighbors. Nothing wild, just burgers, ribs, and some cold drinks. My wife made her famous potato salad and my buddy brought over his guitar. We were laughing, grilling, and reminiscing about old times. Around 6 p.m., I saw Karen peeking over her fence. She had that pinched, sour expression, like she just smelled something rotten. A half hour later, while I was flipping burgers, 2 police officers walked up my driveway. I wiped my hands on my apron, confused. "Evening, officers. Can I help you?" One of them said, "Sir, we got a noise complaint." I was stunned. Noise complaint? We didn't even have speakers outside, just a guitar and people chatting. Before I could answer, Karen strutted over from her yard, arms crossed like she'd just won the lottery. "There, that's the man," she said. "He's violating HOA rules about gatherings, loud music, alcohol, cars parked illegally. It's disturbing the peace." The officers looked at her, then at me, then back at her. One of them asked, "Ma'am, are you the complainant?" Karen puffed out her chest. "I'm on the HOA board. I represent this community." The cop raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "That's not how it works, ma'am." He turned back to me. "Sir, we don't see any problem here. Just keep it reasonable, okay?" They left, and Karen stormed back to her house, fuming. But she wasn't done. The next week, I got 3 violation letters in my mailbox. One for improper lawn maintenance, one for improper parking because my daughter's car was in the street overnight, and another for unauthorized structure, my grill. That's right. Karen had written me up for having a grill in my backyard. Each violation carried a fine, and together they totaled over 600. I knew this wasn't about rules. This was personal. I tried to talk to the HOA board, But Karen dominated every meeting. Anytime I spoke, she'd cut me off. She'd twist the rules, cite obscure bylaws, and intimidate other board members into silence. My neighbors were scared to stand up to her because they didn't want to be targeted. I'll admit it got to me. I started losing sleep, dreading the mail, dreading the sight of her. My wife told me not to let her win, but when you're up against someone who has power and abuses it, it feels like you're banging your head against a brick wall. The final straw came when Karen tried to fine me for excessive smoke from my barbecue. She actually wrote in the violation notice that grilling meat produces offensive odors and smoke that negatively impact the community. That's when I snapped. I wasn't going to let this woman ruin my peace, drain my bank account, and bully me into submission. I decided it was time to fight back, but I knew I had to be smart. I started reading through the HOA bylaws late into the night. And that's when I noticed something strange. The rules Karen had cited for my violations didn't even exist in the official documents. She was making them up or twisting vague language into whatever she wanted. So, I started digging deeper. I filed a request to review the HOA's financial records, which by law, homeowners are entitled to see. Karen tried to stall me, but eventually, I got access. And what I found made my jaw drop. There were irregularities, expenses with no receipts, checks written out to cash, and landscaping contracts that were way above market price. The kicker? The payments all seemed to connect back to companies tied to Karen's relatives. This wasn't just about a BBQ anymore. This was about corruption. I knew I couldn't take her down alone, so I quietly started talking to my neighbors. At first, they were hesitant, but once I showed them the records, their fear turned into anger. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had targeted. One neighbor had been fined for holiday decorations left up too long. Another had been fined for parking violations when their car wasn't even in town. Together, we decided to act. We documented everything: letters, fines, harassment, and financial irregularities. And then, we contacted an HOA attorney. The lawyer was very interested in what we had found. He explained that not only was Karen abusing her power, but she might also be guilty of fraud and misuse of HOA funds. At the next HOA meeting, we were ready. The room was packed more homeowners than I'd ever seen attend. Karen sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, gavel in hand. When it came time for homeowner comments, I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I have some questions about the HOA's finances, I said. Then I started reading off the suspicious transactions. One by one, I laid out the evidence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face turned red. She tried to interrupt, but the attorney we had hired stood up and addressed the room. These are serious allegations. Homeowners have the right to demand accountability, and given the irregularities, we recommend an independent audit. The board members shifted uncomfortably. For once, they weren't blindly backing Karen. The homeowners started demanding answers. Over the next few weeks, the audit took place. The results confirmed everything we suspected. Karen had been misusing HOA funds for years, funneling money into her own pockets, and bullying anyone who stood in her way. The fallout was brutal for her. She was immediately removed from the board. The HOA attorney recommended legal action, and Karen had to pay back thousands of dollars. Her reputation in the neighborhood was destroyed. And as for me, the fines against me were wiped clean. The HOA put new safeguards in place to prevent abuse, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace in my own home again. Looking back, I realized this was never really about a barbecue. It was about standing up to a bully. Karen thought she could intimidate and control people, but in the end, her own arrogance brought her down. I won't lie, it was stressful, exhausting, and at times, I doubted myself. But seeing my neighbors smile again, knowing we took back our community, made it all worth it. And here's the part that still makes me smile. These days, when I fire up my grill, the neighbors come over, and we laugh about the time Karen called the cops on a backyard barbecue. The only smoke around here now is from ribs on the grill, and it smells like freedom. So, if you're ever facing someone like Karen in your own neighborhood, remember this: bullies only win if you stay silent. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply standing up, shining a light, and letting the truth do the work. And that, my friends, is how a simple backyard barbecue exposed corruption, brought down an HOA tyrant, and gave us our neighborhood back.